litigator, and I do telecom and tech stuff, and so we take different approaches to things. But I think we both know enough about lawyers, having done it for nearly 20 years each, that we can give you just some basic advice on how to deal with them. And lawyers can be helpful, they can be a pain, they can be expensive, and I think that there are some things just to sort of keep in mind. And so we've done some work at the Court of Appeals for Veterans Affairs, and because of the odd way that particular court works, lawyers tend to get involved at the end of the process. And we've done 2 cases there. We've won them both, and in both cases, it struck me that the controversy involved was one that could have really been solved early. You know, the controversy was one where it's not that anybody was right or anybody was wrong, but that if a little bit more care had been taken on the, you know, at the beginning of the process and filling out the forms properly and getting things kind of thought through in the beginning, you know, we wouldn't have run up $60,000 bills, trying to sort of fix a problem once it had gone through. So, you know, it may seem like a trivial thing to say, but it is always good to have somebody, you know, whenever you are dealing with the administrative state and with regulatory agencies, to have somebody take a second look at what you're doing, just to make sure that you're providing the information that you should be providing, that you're filling out things in the way that it should be filled out. You know, again, a lot of what I do at the FCC is just simply another version of what you guys are doing when you're interacting with the VA.
And that sort of cautionary tale can apply sort of broadly to a host of different things that you guys are going to encounter. You know, whether it's setting up corporations or some of the other things that we'll talk about. It's always good to think about, should I ask a lawyer to get involved at this point? And part of the process is knowing how to manage the lawyer. You can just sort of dump everything in the lawyer's lap and he'll charge you a whole bunch of money. But if you are more actively engaged and you take the initial steps, you gather all the information, you present something that's succinct and understandable, that will reduce your costs. But don't be afraid early on to seek a lawyer's advice on a range of different issues that you're going to be confronted with.
Your relationship with a lawyer is just like any other relationship that you have, right? And you've got to find a lawyer with whom you're comfortable, with whom you're comfortable about the bill itself, right? Generally speaking, the earlier you talk to a lawyer, the lower your bill ought to be. But you ought to have a lawyer who's very clear to you about what he or she is doing and what's going to happen and how you're going to get charged, right? And who ought to be able to answer all the questions that you have, and who ought to be able to tell you flat out, look, what you want to do is going to result in a whole bunch of money, you know, and maybe we could do it this way, or maybe we should just not do it at all, right? And so part of the trick is finding somebody who's not going to gouge you, and you know, and who, if you come early in the process, isn't going to be, well, boy, you know, I can make my money, you know, because somebody has brought me in, right? And that relationship, in a lot of ways, is you know, it ought to be the same as your relationship with a doctor, right? Where with a good doctor who is kind of telling you what is going on and is there to answer your question.
And if a lawyer is going to charge you for the initial consultation, don't go to that lawyer.
Yes.
Right? Most lawyers will say, yeah, come on in, let's talk through. They'll spend an hour with you and they won't charge you. If they try to charge you, find another lawyer.
This is why we talk about people who want to charge you for the consultation, right? Because now you're already down, you know, a couple $100, and then you think, well, gee, I'm not sure, I didn't like this woman or I didn't like this guy, but I'm already in a couple $100, so what the hell? That's a crappy reason to pick a lawyer, right? That's a really bad reason to pick a lawyer. In fact, the reason why you want to set up a company is so that if somebody sues, they have to sue the company and they don't have to sue you, right? So, you know, and that's kind of the fundamental basic reason to have a company. There are some times when it makes sense to just go on LegalZoom or go on the internet and just register a business, particularly if you are the sole proprietor and if what you're thinking of doing is pretty darn simple. Even so, it is often useful to at least have a consultation with somebody early on. And again, who could tell you, look, what you're thinking of doing is something that you could probably do on the internet, and come to me when things get a little bit more complicated, or things may be complicated right now. So I want to set up a construction business with my brother-in-law, right? Well, one question that maybe you think of or maybe you don't think of is kind of what happens to the business if he's not my brother-in-law anymore, right? That's already probably something that you're not going to get off LegalZoom, or that LegalZoom isn't going to help you figure out. So, a good thing that a lawyer can do, and I don't want to quote my favorite Secretary of Defense, but help you with the unknown unknowns, right? And so early in the process, again, it may make sense to consult with somebody. Say, look, I want to set up a business to do X, and here's what I want to do, and here's what I think the ownership is going to look like. And somebody ought to be able to tell you then, boy, that sounds like a real easy one right down the middle. Go save yourself some money, get on a website, go register in Delaware and do it. Or, let us help you kind of think through some things. And the biggest service a lawyer can render to you is to give you the questions that kind of come up all the time, but you might not think of, right? Again, what happens if he's not your brother-in-law anymore? How do you get out of the business if you want to get out of the business? How do you, what happens when things change? What are the, particularly if you have multiple owners, kind of how do you settle disputes between the owners, kind of that sort of thing, and that's what a lawyer ought to be able to help you with.
Yeah, a lawyer will be able to identify the problems that you can't anticipate. Because a lot of what I do is fight about those problems that come up, and when the agreement or the contract clearly defines what should happen, it's very simple. But when it doesn't, and you have to litigate and fight over these things, it can become very costly, both financially, emotionally, personally. I mean, there's a lot of costs associated with litigation. So the lawyer should be able to help you identify and deal with those beforehand. The other thing I would mention is that lawyers, you don't have to be billed hourly by a lawyer. A lot of lawyers will do all kinds of different fee arrangements. And if you say, look, I want to set up a business, here's the basic structure, what will it cost? If he says, well, I bill $400 an hour, you say, well, can we do it on a fixed fee? Can you cap your fee? I mean, there's a lot of different arrangements. So don't feel like you are stuck paying a lawyer's hourly rate.
I guess I got three things that come to mind. One is, the question is, do the documents work, right? Mm-hmm. Are they binding? Probably they're binding, right? Mm-hmm. The second question is, are they any good, right? And again, if what you want to do is simple, I want to set up my own company with just me as the sole proprietor, and it's just going to be a company, that's fine, right? If it's going to be, I want an agreement with a supplier, or I have an employment agreement, or I have something else, my reaction is maybe it's good enough. My other reaction is, look, the folks who are doing, form documents, are probably doing form documents for a reason, right? They're not they're not the ones who I would hire if I had a real complicated problem. Mm-hmm. And the trick, of course, is kind of knowing when you have a problem for which a form is enough. Mm-hmm. And knowing when you've got a problem where you need to be a little bit creative.
Talk to your friends, talk to other people who have had interactions with lawyers. But that would be the best way to do it, rather than just flipping open the yellow pages and just start cold calling people. Try to find people who can recommend somebody who they've dealt with and had a good experience with.